study. I know that the board authorized a contract to really look at a 30-year plan. And what does education look like in the future with the age of our buildings? So we appreciate you coming, giving your input. Again, this could potentially lead to a bond proposal at some point, but we don't know for sure. It'll obviously go to the board. It's going through the process. And I know I've been getting really good feedback on the fielding group from coming when we had the meetings. I believe they were like November, December, all over the district, and there was very good feedback from participants. So want to thank everyone for coming, and we're very excited that we have fielding. I will only be staying for about a half hour because we have 2 tonight, and I will be going to Etzel Ford. Oh, and I see we have Trustee Barry from the Board of Education. Thank you for coming, Trustee, and we have a lot of other people here. So I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have this scheduled for 90 minutes. We want to try and be respectful of your time tonight. We know in a busy school district, there's always tons of things going on, and in all of your lives, you have many, many opportunities to be engaged in different things. So we are really appreciative of you being here. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate Councilman Paris, who's here, and Representative Burns as well for coming, providing support.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to just very quickly introduce us. We're Fielding International. We are a school design firm. We work all around the world, but we also have a studio and an office right here just outside of Detroit in Ferndale. So my name is Mike. I'm the education design principal, and I'm here with Zach.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
And Zach is a designer with Fielding. And then we have some other partners that are a member of this team that are presenting over at Etzel Ford. So there's a large group of people with us and on this team doing this work as well. We just get to be here today with you. We look to education and the design of schools as an opportunity to create conditions where students can thrive. And we do this in urban, rural, suburban context in the United States and all over. I think we've been on every continent doing this type of work. So I'm excited to be here and to work really in our backyards, which makes this very exciting. So 50 countries in this scenario, and have had a lot of experience doing school design and strategic planning and master planning work. The big idea, one thing that's really important to be mindful of today as we think about this work, is alignment between your vision and a school and community's vision for what schools need to be to support the future of education, and then the educational program, so the things that are actually happening in school, the way that school is conducted in facilities and in districts, and then a big part of this is the environment. So what are the actual physical spaces, the physical resources and opportunities that need to exist in a district in order to support that educational program and overall that vision, the big objectives that a district is looking for. So our approach is centered on creating alignment between these 3 things. So we need to understand the vision, we need to understand the educational program, and then we can begin to think about how the environment can best support those things. So that is the foundation of our approach. So a master plan really helps a district think about what is the scope and then the phasing. When do you do things in order to bring all of your facilities into alignment with your vision? And in a district the size of Dearborn, that's an incredibly complex question. It may take many, many years in order to fully achieve all of the needs that a district of this size has. And so there's a lot of strategy that can be thought about in how to sequence and order that work that needs to happen in schools, all schools, the ongoing maintenance, the addition of resources, the renovation of spaces in order to achieve that vision. And so really it's about the what and the when of the facilities and environment work that needs to occur. And so there are 4 big questions that we're really focusing on in this master plan. The first is how many buildings are needed to support Dearborn's projected population? The second is how can the facility updates that need to occur best support shifting approaches to teaching and learning, because learning and teaching is not a static thing. As we learn more about students, as we learn more about the world, as new technologies are introduced, the way that educators approach teaching and learning also shifts. And so the environment can support those changes. 3, how do we ensure Dearborn Public Schools is prepared for future planning, growth, and change? So looking at some kind of projections and opportunities so that it's not a reactionary strategy, it's a progressive and action-based strategy, so you're taking advantage of what you have in front of you and preparing for the future in a proactive way. And then finally, how do we provide equitable access to opportunities for all Dearborn Public School students? So thinking about the equity of a strategy, looking at ensuring that all students that are a part of this district benefit from the strategic allocation of funding and improvements to the facilities over this long-term plan. So those are the things that we've been asked to do, and we are in the thick of collecting data, analyzing information, and putting together elements of this facilities master plan. So we started earlier this fall gathering a lot of information. We did a series of workshops to understand the school communities, the district's vision for the future of learning. We're going to today give you a quick recap of some of the big takeaways from some of that visioning work. And then we began thinking about aligning the learning environments to the actual facilities you currently have, and understanding what capacity currently exists in Dearborn to support this vision for the future of learning. After that, and where we are right now, which is we're hoping to complete this work sometimes near the end of March, maybe possibly in April, depending on how data comes in and how we're able to respond and need to respond. We are currently in the process of creating a decision-making framework that the district can use to make good decisions on how to allocate funding and how to approach the facility changes that do need to occur. So in order to support that framework for good decision-making, we are also developing scenarios. So the scenarios might outline kind of the big picture approach to how the district decides to kind of like the grand vision of how you move forward with facility changes. So we'll talk a little bit about what might be included in that later on tonight in terms of the concepts that are embedded in a scenario. And then finally, we'll produce a recommendation and a final report for the community so that you can see how we're recommending to the district proceed with the changes, and then what that might look like in terms of the immediate future and then the kind of projected long-term future of the district. So today, the big things that you're going to help us with, one, we're going to do a recap of the vision and some of the elements of space that were already developed earlier this fall, and give you an opportunity to see kind of the context, the background of this information, so that you can be informed for the second parts of the questions that we're going to ask today, which one is thinking about how we do distribute resources throughout this large district. How do you think about facilities as resources and what's embedded in those schools and in the opportunities? And then also the tradition and innovation. We want to talk about, you have many beautiful but very old buildings in this district, and that is a unique point in time for school community to make decisions around what is preserved and what changes might need to occur. And so we're going to get your feedback on some of those very complex and very difficult decisions. We want to know what the community feels about some of these options that we might have to explore. Today, I just want to be clear, what we won't see today is a scenario. What we won't see today is a final recommendation. This is still part of the information and gathering phase so that we can put together that decision, the framework for making good decisions. And so you're helping us inform how the district should be thinking about making decisions around aging facilities. So this is an opportunity to inform the process, not to be given a final product. We are not at that point yet. So before I go any further, which is this first section on vision and space, I will pause real quickly and see if there are any questions that we can answer related to the overall kind of context or just this beginning introduction of what we're here to do today, some of the information that you might see, or any burning questions that you think might be helpful in order for you to participate well this evening. So I'll pause for just a minute. If anyone has questions, I'll answer those. We also have people streaming in online. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. There's an opportunity for you to add questions. And so if you do add your questions, we have some folks that will feed those to us so that we can try and answer some of those. All right? So any questions from the room that we can get started with? All right. Not yet. Anything pressing right now, David, that we should be responding to?
I think some of the questions here are things that you're going
Great. Great. So some of the questions coming in, just to recap, because he doesn't have a mic, are things that we will likely cover in the presentation tonight. So if we don't get to them, we do have a strategy to collect all questions that folks have, and our intent is to provide answers to those questions after these sessions once we gather them for the community in a consolidated resource. So all the questions that are asked, we'll hopefully find an opportunity to respond and then distribute that to the district. So starting, vision and space. How might we align Dearborn's vision for the future of learning with the physical environment? All right, so this is really the opportunity to think about what does teaching and learning need to look like in the future, and then how do we design space for that, right? So what happens if teaching becomes more online or more hybrid, or what happens if maybe the opposite of that occurs and technology becomes less important in school and everything needs to be hands-on experiences. I just offer those as two kind of wild, maybe wild, different visions. So we asked Dearborn to come together and say, what do we imagine is the future of our district? So we conducted multiple focus groups. We engaged hundreds of participants, including students, and we asked these questions about the future of learning. In those workshops, or after those workshops, we also sent out a survey and collected nearly 2,000 survey respondents from the community related to their perceptions of the future of teaching and learning. And then we also visited 33 different buildings in the district through this process to kind of get a snapshot and understanding of what the current condition is in Dearborn. So all of this is part of the big data collection process. There's some really big, and this is a synthesis of our findings so far, there's some big ideas that we want to highlight for you. So one is people are very excited about the opportunity to bring Dearborn into the future. They recognize and identify that this is a moment when we can do something really amazing for the district. Second, that this community is incredibly strong. All of the workshops we found, and we learned from educators that they've been working here for not just years, but decades in many cases, which is not common in most schools that we work with, especially today. What was particularly notable is the amount of time that your leaders in these buildings and leaders at the district level have committed to education. In other districts in the state, the average tenure of a building principal is somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years. And in Dearborn, we talked to many building leaders that have been a part of the district and have been in leadership positions for over 10 and in some cases 20 and 30 years, which is amazing, right? So that is a unique asset that Dearborn has. That's something we want to think about as we're thinking about long-term planning. There are existing barriers that are getting in the way of innovation. So things like constraints with both the sizes of space, but also just kind of the baseline conditions of schools. So things like temperature, things like natural lighting, things like barriers between educators that want to work together. So those are some things like restrooms that don't feel adequate. Those are challenges that were identified in these takeaways that we know we need to resolve, almost at a baseline level, a must-do. And then finally, there's certainly this desire to balance both the traditions held in Dearborn, both around what quality education looks like, but also the spirit of innovation. What can the future be, and how do we create a school system that really embraces the changes that might support students' successful futures? So those are like the big, highest level takeaways. There are some very specific things that we heard about like what this could be. So one, what we heard, the priorities for the future of learning, this notion of space to breathe. So a little bit of space to spread out so people do not feel so constrained in buildings. Lots of opportunities and excitement around hands-on workshop-based learning. So getting students involved with things that they can manipulate with their hands, projects that they can do together, all sorts of opportunities, project-based learning, workshop-based experiences. Meaningful and relevant and real-world learning was a priority. So the idea of connecting what students are learning about to things that they care about, things that are happening in this community, or things that they see occurring every single day. So making sure that that's a part of the experience that all students have. This notion of a differentiated experience or differentiation. So many students today, educators continue to recognize that every learner may need different resources and supports to be their best learning self. And so creating some level of individual opportunity for students can really help them thrive and do their best work. Flexibility, so recognizing that The one constant in the future of learning is that schools are changing more and more rapidly. Every single year, the amount of change that schools are being asked to adapt to is only increasing. So how do we create spaces that provide more flexible uses? So that was a request. Variability, so having a different range of spaces, so sometimes having small spaces, sometimes having big spaces, sometimes having active spaces, and sometimes having quiet spaces, and designing a school facility to support this range of experience. And then finally, agility, which is the idea of a space that can rapidly transform. So flexibility is a range of use. Variability is the different sizes and kind of allotments of space. And then agility is the speed at which a space can transform and adapt to something new. And so this is kind of a trifecta of three big ideas that emerged, which really conveys a very, I would say, dynamic school system, right? And a lot of the facilities that currently exist in most schools across the United States are not so dynamic. They're very static. And so how can we create a future vision that adds this level of flexibility is a great question. We did many surveys, so students, guardians, so this is a pie chart of the people that responded to the survey. So many parents, many staff members, and really a great portion of students even out of this 2,000 responded to the survey. And some key findings from that survey. One is, this question: what are the top 3 skills that you think are going to be important to thrive in your future? And when we say your future, the student's future, not my future, but a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old. So 3 themes that emerge from that. The most important: critical thinking and analysis, creativity, originality, and initiative, and then reasoning, problem solving. So these convey kind of a set of competencies or skills that people are longing for. We need our students to be ready to do these things really well so that they can thrive. The next question were the top 3 experiences that will help students build the skills that they need for the future. So if those are the skills you want, how do we actually teach those things? What are the things we need to provide to learners? So the number 1 response was real-world application. Get kids involved in things that matter to them, that are actually a part of their lives. 2, hands-on activities, so we see a trend repeating. And then 3, exploring different career opportunities within the community, which often can translate to exposing students and schools to more people, more experts, more opportunities to draw on all of the resources you have in the community. And then one more finding that's relevant is what are your priorities as you think about a long-term strategic plan? What's most important? So number 1, the safety of the buildings, and related to that, which is not specifically listed here, the people inside of them. All right, it's not just the buildings, it's the inhabitants. So that was a clear number 1. 2, the support of academic programming, that's actually a very important data point. And then 3, functionality and comfort of the buildings. So what we're really describing is a safe space where great learning can happen. And it's comfortable, right? It's a place that kids want to go and community members want to show up in. So we're not packing people into this isn't sardines duplicated throughout the building. We want spaces where people feel welcomed and they're excited to be. And all of this other data is really important too, but we find that these key findings are helpful. So all of that said, we do want to let the community know that a baseline part of the strategic plan, not only based on this data, but what is just good for schools in general, these are things we will look to address and help the district in this master plan, things that really have to occur for a school to function or for a district to function well. So 1, we need to think about both artificial, but especially natural lighting, and making that lighting abundant and controllable for students. Natural lighting is an incredibly high indicator of quality space for learning, right? And so that's very, very important. 2, we know and we've heard many times, and it is loud and clear, reliable heating, cooling, and ventilation is critical, right? That has to be at the forefront of the decision-making process to make sure that these facilities function at a baseline level so that they can be comfortable and students don't have to worry about how they feel in a space. 3, we heard that the variety and flexibility of the spaces need to be aligned to what learners need. And so that's something that we will must be considered at every step. 4, it has to be ADA compliant. Accessibility needs to be considered at every step. This is a legal requirement, but also something that we want to ensure is prioritized so that all schools, there's equitable access. The intentional acoustic and sound management, so not just thinking about spaces, but how do you man it? When you do lots of workshops and project-based learning and labs and things like that, it creates sound. And so how do you create environments that aren't distracting to other learners? That's an important part of this. So managing that sound well. Creating thoughtful storage and access to resources. If you ask staff generally, one of the most common responses that we get related to this particular point, what's really important to educators? All of these things around project-based learning are there, but at the end of the day, they always come up and they say, Mike, whatever you do, make sure we have more storage, right? Like we've got all of this great stuff that we do with students. We need to have a place that we can get to it and that students can get to it. Reliable safety and security systems is certainly a priority. That was a #1 priority for the community, so that will be at the forefront of every decision in terms of making these spaces safe and secure for learners. And then finally, clean and inclusive restrooms, right? Restrooms are actually really important. There's a dignity to being able to exist in a school and feel comfortable in all parts, including restrooms. So these are kind of at the baseline of the work that we are putting together to help Dearborn make clear decisions about how to approach their facility needs. These are all part of the equation. And not only part, these are the first parts of the equation. How do we make sure we're handling this well? We also heard, and this is the last piece before we ask and answer more questions, what are the things that are really getting in the way of achieving these priorities? And so what we heard is that there's not enough space. Sometimes training isn't supporting things like project-based learning and some of these pedagogical or teaching and learning strategies. Transportation can be a challenge. Technology is rapidly evolving, and so we want to be able to respond to that. And just we heard that a lot of those baseline needs that we just talked about aren't being met in buildings, and so we need to address that. In terms of mindset, the shifting of different priorities. So there's a lot of stress in schools. Students are still recovering kind of from the impact of COVID. I just use that as one example, that the priorities of taking care of all learners is different than it was even 5 years ago. There is maybe some misunderstanding around what happens in a school and what the need actually is. Differences in the ways people parent, just the overall professional wellness of educators. I've heard multiple times tonight even, your extremely dedicated staff have been here for a very long time, and that can happen many days in a row because of all the amazing things that the district is doing, and then just how are we responding to the various forms of trauma that students have experienced that are in this district. And then finally, the actual structures. So the schedule, the space, the way that assessments happen can sometimes be standardized in a way that not all students are equipped to succeed on them. The curriculum has felt rigid to some, and that sometimes a very traditional approach to grading may not capture the brilliance of some students that don't perform on those traditional measures. So these were some of the things that people expressed getting in the way. So the big problem that we're solving and helping solve and thinking about is how do we remove these barriers so we can get these baseline needs met and then go beyond to that future vision. And that's a really complex thing to solve. So that's the full context of the work that's happened up to this point. The final piece here is these design drivers. So taking all of that data and presenting it to the district and saying, all right, when we take all of this, what do we really need to be sure we're prioritizing? We need to summarize this in a way that is easy to understand so that we can really think about each of these points when we're putting this master plan together. So these 7 pieces are what emerged from this work. So 1, the students come first. This is a student-centered project. We need to make sure that we are not just meeting baseline needs, but creating the conditions for some form of inspiration for the community. And then community is about cultivating belonging, making sure all people are welcomed in this master plan. Collaboration, the opportunity for people to work together to solve problems was a priority. Creating a resilient system, so something that flexibility, agility, that ability to change and adapt. Prioritizing wellness of the inhabitants. And then, of course, extremely important, safety. Everything has to be safe and secure so that the people inside of these buildings can do all of these other amazing things. So I'm going to pause right there for questions again. Would love to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of data that we just gave to you. But after this, I'm going to have everyone do an exercise together. So we'll all get up and start looking at some of the content on the walls. So any questions that we can answer from folks in the room about everything you just heard in terms of prioritizations and how we're approaching this? Yes, sir. Oh, here. Can you take the mic over there and do the question thing that way? That way, we have folks online. That way, they can hear the questions.
Can you go back to that screen that you had up there earlier?
This one?
Yes. So you have students first. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
For the last 2 years, our students have been in classrooms, possibly even 3 years now, and our students haven't been first. It's been the district. It's been a lot of, like, I would call it community, a lot of like things that shouldn't be a part of the classroom have come first rather than the students' actual learning. Some of the students that are leaving this district and possibly going to other districts are finding out easily that if they were an A student here, they're ranking possibly a C in other districts comparative to Dearborn, where we're seeing a huge learning gap in math and English, social studies, science, etc. And then can you elaborate a little bit more on the community aspect of this proposal?
Sure. So I appreciate your comments, heard and understood, and I do think that's why a plan to address these challenges is important. So I'm hoping that we can be helpful in that process. That said, what is community? So cultivating belonging and reflect community identity. This is a very diverse community in the sense of the range of cultural, culture, ethnic, and just the range of people that exist in this community and go to this district. So we want to ensure that the district is supportive of that full range of kind of identity that calls Dearborn home. So what that might mean is to ensure, for instance, in some schools, there have been a prioritization of, for instance, prayer rooms in schools where folks can find a place to engage in that part of their life. So things like that make going to school comfortable and familiar, that reflect the people that are attending in this district. Does that answer that question? It's just one specific example.
A more broad explanation of like how our tax dollar will be used to enhance the community when all we're looking for is a hell of a lot more education in the classrooms than a lot more community in the classrooms. I mean, everybody knows it's a very diverse city.
Sure.
So that said, in other districts, people don't really look at each other's, ethnicity, background, et cetera. They basically focus on curriculum. And I think this is what this district is lacking: leadership and curriculum. And I just, when you throw out community, it strikes a different tone for me. I guess from what I've been seeing lately, will we have like little scratch and claw areas for students? Will we have little, puppy pile areas for students? Well, I think you just need to be a little bit more, broad with your explanation of community. I get the prayer things, that's touching on the fact that, most of us here are Muslim. And, that doesn't sit well with me, the fact that you're doing that, but,
So what we've heard is, and because we are limited in time here, what I want to make sure that your voice is heard. So as we move through here, we'll have some opportunities for people to engage, and please come up and chat with me. We can talk more about it. What is important is that every student that shows up to a school knows that they belong in a building, that they're going to be cared for by the people that are there caring for them, and that's elementary through senior year. So I think what we mean by community is making sure this word belonging is incredibly important, that kids know that school is safe, that they can be there, they'll be taken care of, and that is a priority. And how tax dollars would be used to do that is, as you think about developing or updating facilities, creating the conditions so when somebody does show up at the building that they know that they belong there and that they are welcome in that
but
space.
how does that help them with their curriculum on a day-to-day basis? How does that help you as an educator teach them the skills they need for a 21st century education?
Sure.
How does that give them the 3 years they lost? Okay.
Yep.
And by the way, when our students are going to college, they're facing a huge, smack right in the face because they're going into a higher learning setting where they've just come from the worst learning setting, and then they're, realizing that college is actually super, super, super hard, and they didn't get any of the tools they needed. There was no college prep. There wasn't.
So how
There's a
how
huge
does it help
gap.
that?
We're seeing
Yep.
4.0 students on scholarship or non-scholarship become, 2.0,
Yep.
2.5 GPAs.
I understand the concern. So what I would like to do is I would love to follow up with you and we can talk more about it. What I will add to this is if you're familiar, there's a framework called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but one of the things that research says is that there are some fundamental needs that need to be taken care of for an adult or a student to be prepared to do learning, to engage in that process. And if we aren't meeting those baseline needs, it becomes very difficult for them to be in a space where they can actually learn well. So this notion of belonging is responding to some of that type of science about the science of learning. That being said, I'll offer that to kind of the full answer, but in more detail, if we want to talk about some specific ways that we see these types of things supporting actual academic outcomes, I'm happy to continue that conversation with you. But we do need to move on from that specific topic. I just saw 2 hands go up, so I'll take an opportunity to respond to some of those questions. Zach, can you bring the mic up here? I saw your hand go up first. Do you want to? Yep.
Sure. Thank you. I wanted to just share with the group, as someone who's a former middle school teacher and coming from 10 years at the University of Michigan, I will say I think that having community in our schools is incredibly important. And when any of our students get to a university, specifically a place like U of M, which is the top public university in the country, diversity, equity, and inclusion is everything. So our students certainly need a strong curriculum. They also need that DEI experience to be able to exist and thrive in, I'm speaking and I will finish. Thank you so much. I have the microphone right now. Thank you. I'm gonna speak. Can I,
So yeah,
I'd like to finish what I'm saying.
Yeah, if we
Thank
could
you.
have her finish, and we can follow up with that. I'll happy to answer
Yes.
that for you, sir. Yep.
And I'll wrap this up. Or maybe I won't. I would like to finish. So I'm going to finish speaking. Again, as someone who worked at the top public university in the country for 10 years, I tell you from experience, grades matter, who you are matters, and how you exist and interact with others and have that diversity, equity, and inclusion experience matters. When you're writing, an essay and you're applying to a university, any university, but especially a place like U of M, they're going to want you to be able to speak to that, and we need to make sure that all of our students are growing up and are learning in an inclusive environment, whatever their identity may be, wherever they are on the identity spectrum, because that's part of being a success in life beyond, whatever bubble we all come from. And I think that's incredibly important as our students get out into the world and become adults. And so I wanted to share that, and I appreciate that that's part of this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. And do you have another question?
Hi, I'm speaking as a parent. It's question/comment.
Please.
It's if we go back, please, to the slide where it shows the baselines. And I'm a firm believer, like when we talk about education as a parent, I don't only care and focus on the numerical grades and GPA. Yes, it's absolutely important, but I also care about the mental and psychological state of my child when I send them home. And with that, because this is a very important factor for them to unlock their potential that will eventually give them good grades. And why I'm saying this comment to ask about the question when it comes to baseline, I know that when you mention ADA compliance, we usually talk about physical things, but what about the mental one? The mental component, can it be more like highlighted element in those baselines? And when we talk about mental, of course, we mean emotional and more of that the Maslow pyramid that you mentioned.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I appreciate the comment. And so what we would like to, I'm going to, just because we are short on time, I want to talk about some of the types of spaces that we look at in most schools, the things that they're adding into learning environments to support kind of this wide range of needs, both academic and social learning needs. So I'm going to talk through those, and then what we have in the room is a series of images based on kind of a series of exercises. We compiled a bunch of data from community members to say, what are the types of spaces you think are going to be most important to support academic and social learning priorities? So some of those concepts. One, places where educators and students can meet one-on-one in environments where they can focus on direct instruction. Direct instruction, we know scientifically, is one of the most effective ways to help a student learn. So we need to create places where that can occur for students that need that additional support. Two, we need more collaborative spaces where learners can actually work together and build those social bonds. Learning by its nature is a social process. So learning with other people can help reinforce ideas and help reinforce concepts that some students they won't necessarily hear, or they won't gather from maybe just an educator, but they may have a peer that can help them understand something in a way that an educator may not have been able to. Building trust and relationships. So this responds to some of those social needs. Educators and students at the foundation need to have a relationship of trust at the very, like, I trust that you're here doing the best things for me. So creating spaces where educators can build and foster relationships with kids is important. This notion of having multiple places to learn or practice something, so a variety of ways for students to demonstrate their learning, so educators can help them achieve at the highest level possible, aligned with what that kid does well. So this picture just shows these students are working on the whiteboard, these students are on laptops, there's another group of students over here working kind of at a high desk table, so just a wider range of environments. Three, this new and meaningful contexts. One thing we know from kind of the science of learning is if you can connect learning to something that's relevant to you, something that's important to you, your acquisition, but more importantly, the retention of that knowledge persists longer. And so connecting learning to things that are meaningful to a student. Having a little more personalization, so some options for students to choose. And then, of course, these kind of constructive environments, these hands-on workshop opportunities. So these all are priority environments that based on the data that we've collected with the district, these are all the types of spaces we need to find ways to add and integrate into existing facilities so your students have the wide range of resources needed for educators to use. So we went through a process of having educators, students, parents, adults identify what they thought might be supportive of their learners' needs. And we used something called design patterns, which takes kind of ideas of actual physical space and consolidates it into a simple concept. And we had people actually go around the room after a series of workshops talking about the future of learning and their specific academic and social learning needs. What do you see as being important? So the PTA team is the dark blue, the special educators chose the red, the elementary educators were looking at green, and so we categorized how people were responding to these different design patterns. And so just as an example, here a STEAM workshop was particularly powerful for the elementary educators, saying we really need these environments. And the middle school, but in the high school they said, you know, we have a lot of labs and workshops already. One of the things that we need more of is community space, where students can actually come together and build social bonds. We saw a huge affinity to this notion of a small group room, especially for special educators. You know, and that directly responds to the needs that they have, often working with very small groups, doing those direct instructional experiences. So these were the top 5 areas that emerged for all votes. STEAM workshops, community spaces where learners and adults can collaborate and come together, calming retreats, and so that responds to these kind of social wellness-based environments where we see so many more disruptions in classrooms today than we did 3 years ago, where students are getting overstimulated, overactive, and they're disrupting learning in a way that makes it difficult to teach because the teacher has to respond to that. Yep. ELD, so this is your English acquisition language. Yep. So those calming retreats create environments where a kid can proactively regulate, so you don't have to remove them from a class, and then teaching doesn't have to be disrupted. The learning suite is the idea of 2 classrooms that are connected to provide a little more flexibility, and then the small group room are these kind of dedicated learning spaces for direct instruction. We also categorize the top 3 patterns for each of these groups. and those are actually distributed around the room. And so what we want you to do as kind of a first opportunity here is for folks in the room to stand up, and in just a very quick scan, what we want you to do is look at the different design patterns that surfaced as being these priorities for the district. And as you're looking at it, if you see something that's particularly exciting to you, there's an excitement poster here and an excitement poster here, and you all have sticky notes and Sharpies. So if you see something that really resonates with you as a community member, it says, yes, this is exactly, I think, something that will be really important to us. We'd like to know what that is. So feel free to write excitement on there and stick it on those. If you have questions or concerns about something, we have a question over here and a question back in the corner on the other side. Please, similarly, if you're like, oh, I'm not sure I see how this is supportive of students' best interests, write down that question. Anything that ends up on this question poster tonight and questions that we find online, we will compile a response to at some point. We may not be able to get to all of them tonight, but we will put together a response within the next few days and then be able to distribute that out so then the district can share that with participants and you can see the responses to questions we're not able to surface tonight. So what I would ask that you do is, let's see, it is 7:14. So in about 10 minutes, we just want to do a quick scan. I encourage you all to stand up, scan the posters around the room. For each poster, there's a pattern and then some images that kind of convey what that might actually look like in a built space. And see the things that are exciting and the questions that are surfacing for you, and then put them on these posters. While that's happening, if you have a specific question related to any of these big themes, please come up and find me. I'm happy to continue answering specific questions that you might have. So we're going to come back together at 7:25 to move on, answer and vocalize a couple questions, and then move on to the next part of the workshop where we want to really get you focused in on how the community might share and use resources in a master plan, what the future looks like. All right, so 10 minutes, we'll be back in 10 minutes. For those of you that are online, I am now going to flip through some images that kind of show you what folks in the room are looking at. And again, thanks for being online. This is a 5-minute warning for folks that are in the room, 5 minutes. All right, folks, that's the 60-second warning here, and then we're going to answer and respond to some of the questions that folks put on the boards. All right, I'm gonna get started with a couple of these, just while people are wrapping up in the room. One question that we have over here, I have a few. So there's some questions related to like outdoor learning and things like that. How is that supported? Absolutely. Michigan is a cold place. So we're not talking about a massive, like radical investment in outdoor learning. What we're talking about are some opportunities just outside of different areas of school where if a teacher does want to take kids outside, whether for them to burn off some steam or to just change the condition for the kids, which can be really helpful in resetting, you know, a select place where that can occur on a school grounds. So often these are integrated right into like play areas. And so that is one approach, but just to clarify, we're not talking about like moving all of school outside. There's a notion of learning community, one of these patterns which is related to having kind of a combination of different learning environments that are connected to one another. How do we make sure that these are great spaces? So this is a learning community, and so you see like a lab and a small group room and a suite that's connected. The comment is this is going to need great acoustic management because that seems like kind of a busy place. You're right, 100%. And so any school that approaches this type of pattern is thinking carefully about how the flow of students and how acoustics work in there. And that's why does that matter at a master plan level? Well, anything that's a part of a change to facilities has some cost associated with it. And so that's why it's important to know if this is part of the future, how do we plan for those costs, right? If this is really important to teaching and learning. And these decisions are not finalized yet. I want to make sure that that's clear. Nothing that you're seeing today is a final path forward. That's why you're all here helping us. A couple of questions. Maybe I missed something. Do students have choice in their learning? Question mark. One of the common trends, in teaching and learning around the world is providing opportunities to have some voice and choice in specific experiences that they have. That helps build this idea of kind of learner agency and helps them be engaged. It helps them say that they have a role in their own future, in their own teaching experience. We're not saying that students would come into a school and they own the school, right? There's still classrooms, there's still teachers, there's still directed experiences. But within that direction, providing some options like, hey, it seems like you're feeling pretty antsy today. Would it be better for you to work in the small group room space? And maybe that will allow you to focus. That would be like an example of a choice that a student may be able to have. So the range of spaces could be supportive of things like that. Let's see, is there data on cost offsets? So when we go through and make these changes, how does it influence the overall operational cost of a district? So sustainability is an incredibly important part. It's so important that it's just kind of integrated into every decision. So things like bringing in daylighting, things like orienting windows to, for instance, the south to help with solar gain, to like passively heat a space. Those are types of things that will be considered in any type of renovation or construction that might occur in a long-term plan. And that will be always considered on a case-by-case basis to optimize the building. So energy optimization is 100% a huge part of long-term sustainability and a part of the plan that will be considered. And then one more, small group rooms. Can they be used by the community for small meetings? Absolutely, that's exactly the point. If you have a wide range of spaces, you have more opportunities for people to use a wide range of environments. And so ideally, small group rooms or maybe even mid-sized group rooms could be integrated in some of these buildings to support community engagements like that. There was some questions online, just wanted to respond to like, hey, who are these guys? What do they do? We kind of briefly touched on it, but Fielding is an architecture firm. So we have a huge team of architects that work on this work. But the other thing is we are interdisciplinary. So we have architects and educators. So I'm actually an educator. I was a certified principal in Michigan, I've been an instructor. Zach is a designer, and the team of architects working on the master plan are actually over at the other school doing an engagement over there. So we have an interdisciplinary team. There were some questions about like physical replacements of systems, things like boilers and stuff like that. 100%, a master plan will address and help a district make informed decisions about the useful life of different mechanisms that are in place, and then strategically decide when to replace things and when to maintain things. So there's a cost model behind all of the scenes. It's a giant spreadsheet that's being developed with all the data we're collecting to help the district make choices like that. So when does the boiler get replaced versus maintenance? But ideally, in a 25 to 30-year plan, many of those systems would be replaced to more efficient, more optimized systems. I think we'll leave it at that for now for those questions. Any comments that anybody wants to add related to the walk around? Could you, yeah, go ahead. We'll be right there with a microphone.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that beautiful walk around and all those great ideas. It was very inspiring to see, and I'm sure some of our schools already have a lot of this, and we'll probably want to work on improving it. When you talk about the master plan, and I know, thank you for describing exactly what you guys do, because that's very important. You're coming to study the existing buildings and doing regression studies and cost-benefit analysis and trying to take also the academic and the academic needs and the student needs and the safety needs and putting it all together into a master plan. I think that's what the community is looking for.
Yes.
So thank you for explaining that. One thing that I'm still missing, maybe you can explain it to us, is that master plan, like exactly what you're doing and when and how. If you can clarify that to all of us too, because we're seeing this kind of today, it's like one aspect of it.
Yes.
But we want the full big picture too.
Okay. Timeline and kind of the contents. I actually have a slide that responds to that, and it comes up in a little bit. Is that okay? Okay. Yep, no problem. We do want to show you. It is a complex process, but we do want to show you that, and so we will get there. Any other questions? Yes.
I love seeing more windows. I think that's a really great thing. But you talked about safety being the first concern, and 10 years ago, I don't think this would have even come into my mind. But when I see lots and lots of windows facing outside of the school, now I feel more and more nervous. A lot of schools in Dearborn have like inner courtyards, and I wondered if that might be something that the district or you might be leaning towards, really utilizing those inner courtyards and using those for natural light rather than so much on the outside of the school?
It's a great question. I'll say any opportunity to bring in natural light from any direction, we would look at capitalizing on. That being said, would we be carving out huge portions of the exterior and adding giant windows? It's not likely that would be a cost benefit or a learning benefit, so we wouldn't be changing kind of the facades of buildings in that way. If we were to build a new facility, one of the things that we would recommend, and I should offer that in the master plan, we are not designing new schools in a master plan. It's more of a level of, this building is out of its useful life, we recommend replacing it, as an example. But as you move forward into the design of new facilities, some of the things that you would look at is bringing in natural light from the exterior. And so is that safe, is a question. Now, this could be an entire 6-hour workshop by itself. I don't want to go down that path, but I would say is something to grapple with is once we go to the point of creating very isolated exterior walls, would you let kids outside for recess? Would you let kids outside to get to the bus, right? And it becomes a very slippery slope, like what is too much? And so I would entertain that the humanity and the welcoming nature of a school is perhaps more important than some of those things, given what we know about how crises happen. It's usually through the front door. It's usually through circumstances that could be prevented with other mechanisms. So, and I don't want to go too far past that, and something that we can talk more about if you'd like to. Yep. Yes, sir. Oh, go ahead. He's faster than me.
He's getting a workout.
That's right.
I was introduced earlier, but tonight I'm here as a parent and a grandparent, and our respect for time, a simple yes or no is okay. If it's yes, we'll get to the data. Those 200 students that you spoke to, did they give you, in the survey, did they tell you about their experiences in the bathrooms in our buildings?
Yes, actually. To some extent, yes. Yeah, so one of the things that we had students do, because it can be very complicated for students to express verbally some of these themes, so we use drawing. as a way to kind of solicit feedback from all age groups. So everywhere from, I think, 3rd grade all the way up to seniors in high school, we did this exercise. And I will just, like, clean environment right there, right? Lots of data suggesting kind of inferences to some of the conditions that they're not comfortable with. And so we use those inferences to help inform. And of course, right there is the result of that direct feedback. So that's the easiest way for me to describe that. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would like to also call out the amazing and brilliant engagement from the kids, right? They were very articulate about what they need. And so this is reflective of their interests. So how might we distribute resources throughout the community to ensure all students have equitable access? This is a series of questions that we would love to engage you in here in the room. So on the top, when the poll is active, so pollev.com fielding INTL 505, if you want to log on to that or just scan this giant QR code, that will take you to something on your phone to respond to a series of questions about your current experience as a parent or as a community member, and then what might you want, all right? So we're gonna just give you all just a couple minutes to log in. I do not recommend the text. For whatever the reason, the text strategy is very cumbersome and complex, so do not text. Please put in this domain or use the QR code. And once you've got it and you're locked in, what should be this question: do you walk to school? Give me a thumbs up if you see this on your phone, or if anyone sees this on their phone. Okay. Are we there? For those of you that want to participate. Okay, number 1, do you walk to school? All right. And so what we're really trying to get to are community's feedback and responses to how we might think about, in the master plan, the shifting and reallocation of different resources around the district. So now we're going to go to the next one. During off-school hours, do you use the school building resources? So this might be for meetings, this might be for a sports event, this might be for the knitting club. This should be for you as an individual. So I guess it would be I think that might be the only question that would be. Yep. As a family, yes. Yep, as a family. Yep. Yeah, perfect. And you should be able to change your response too on this slide. Okay. Great. So lots of use after hours. I'm going to move to the next one. During off-school hours, do you ever visit a school playground with your family? And recognize that this is we'll be doing this resource with many people online and people in other engagements across the district. So this is a kind of an aggregated response to some of these ideas. Okay. Do you participate in extracurricular? So again, just as a reminder, this is your current existence in Dearborn.
This would include our kids.
Your family, yep. Okay. Attend school performances. Great. So would your students play school-affiliated sports? So is your student involved in sports? Okay. Do you ever use a school media center? So would you, as a family, so you and your family go in and use a space for a computer, printer, scanner, an audio recorder, some of these resources that are commonly found in these media centers as a family? All right. Have you ever used a school garden in any capacity? So this would be either, sometimes there are like butterfly or like watershed gardens. Sometimes it's a food space where food is being grown. School-affiliated outdoor recreation space. So this might be separate from a playground. We're thinking more of like your athletic facilities. So basketball courts, fields, baseball diamonds, track. Tennis courts. That might be a big one sometimes. Okay. Oop. And then adult classes. So if you as an individual do any adult classes at Dearborn. And so a lot of these questions are helping us understand beyond the academic role that a district plays in a community, how is it supporting the broader reach of resources that are needed to make a community great? So this would be indoor recreation spaces, so pool, a weight room, gymnasium. And again, as a reminder, this would be separate from like the sports program that your kids have signed up for, right? This would be you're going in and you're using the gym for pickup basketball. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Lots of the other community members are not here today.
Right.
This is not a very scientific poll. It doesn't represent the community. So is this, I know you sent it to a few hundred students, but I mean, if you're going to make decisions on a small group of people, I don't think it's proper. That's what you're saying.
This is, so I mean, this is, so
Just
anytime
an example? Is this just an example of what you're going to do?
No, some of the, so anytime we send this out to like a group, all of this content will be aggregated into like this group's response. So anybody that was a part of this presentation, all of your, so what we can basically infer from that is community members who have chosen to engage in this is the type of responses we would see. We would also distribute it more broadly to groups that were not here, and we have like an online group as an example. So we can infer different data points from that. We can't, of course, force anyone to take this. So everybody that takes it will be opting into it in some capacity. What we'll use from this data are things to understand the types of resources that are being used well, so that as we think about the realignment of different resources throughout communities, how do we prioritize different parts of the buildings? So for instance, do we need more gymnasiums because we see a huge range of support and there's a lot of response that says, hey, we don't have enough of these environments for us to access. It would be informing those types of decisions.
I guess what he's saying is that really there's like 5 parents and maybe,
Yeah.
more parents should be involved or actual a lot more than maybe 5.
Totally understood. And I know that a fairly extensive communication strategy, well, like I'll say attempt, but certainly reach people, but that was initiated to get people to show up. This is the one of multiple meetings, and I'm hopeful that if we do not have a representative population, we will use this as another data point, but this is not going to inform every decision that's made.
Can I follow up to that, please?
Sure.
So if, because I understand their question, I mean, right now is pretty a difficult time for parents to get out. You've got extracurricular activities and such. Is this gonna be a survey that goes out to parents, to the districts, so that, you collected your data beforehand, I know using Google Forms. Are you gonna be sending this out again, or is this only gonna be collected with the parents that show up to these meetings?
So we wanted to start with what happens when in these meetings to see what's there. And then our strategy would be if we do not have a reasonable or representative amount of data, just like a survey strategy. If you go out and you survey for like a political poll, and you don't get enough respondents to use the data, you adjust your strategy. And so if we don't have a representative amount of responses to make this useful, we'll work with the district on a different distribution method to get more respondents. Yep. And in addition to this, we have a follow-up set of questions that are, what would you be doing, right? Like what beyond what you're currently using, what direction would you go if you had access to more of these resources? Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So that here we are. The next set of questions. It's literally the same set of questions, or very close to the same set of questions, but imagining a future in Dearborn that might be different. Would you like to walk to school? Would you like to do these things? If in a future orientation of the arrangement, would you like to use art facilities as a community resource? Okay, so here we go. Would you use the school building? And that's a broad general statement, of course. Okay. Would you ever visit a school playground in the future if you had access to it, or closer access to it? Would you participate in extracurricular activities if there were more offered or the environments to support them were improved? Engaging in classes, adult classes, if they were offered, or you had more access to them. Attending a school performance.
Also, just to supplement what Mike has already said, I think it's worth saying that I know he's kind of going through this quickly, but it is being captured as well, all of the data from this. So it's really not just a visual trick to show you guys, it's actually going somewhere organized that you came to this event and you said this. So it is being captured to that extent, even if it isn't a large number of people, to your point.
Sports, if the facilities were improved or your local's community was offering more programming. Using media resources. School garden. Recreation spaces, basketball courts, fields, baseball diamonds, a track. All right. Recreation space, pool, weight room, basketball courts, indoors. Art facilities. Okay, so what we'd like you to do now, and this is going to be the final exercise for the evening. I think this will be the last thing we do. I will have an exit ticket for you, though. I'll have something I want you to finish at the end before you go out, so we'll get that prepped while you're doing this in 10 minutes. At your tables, there's a large sheet of paper. If you're sitting by yourself, I would encourage you to join in with someone to have a conversation and collaborate on your responses here. But if you could, on your large sheet of paper, just do a 1, a 2, and a 3, and then provide any feedback you have related to any of these questions. What community resources are most important for Dearborn Public Schools to prioritize? So, for example, maybe it's a community pool, or maybe it's an arts center, or maybe you just want better playgrounds, right? So what are these community-wide opportunities that you think would be critical for adding to a master plan? So we can think about how to allocate space and where to locate those things. 2, what career and technical training opportunities are most important for your public schools to prioritize? So there's certainly a demand and an interest in more meaningful and relevant programming. We've heard that loud and clear. are there programs that you see as being particularly important? We do know from work that we've done in other areas, kind of national and global trends in these areas, but we would like to know from you as community members things that you see as being priorities, the interests that you hear, the opportunities that you see as professionals and adults. And then third, what resources should you prioritize for younger learners to support their academic and social development? So knowing that this is more likely to influence that secondary program, what are the experiences and opportunities, or really the resources that we need to be thinking about providing to our youngest learners? So maybe it's language labs or health and wellness learning, or maybe it's just more guest speakers to get kids involved in new ideas, right? These are just examples. So this is your opportunity to really write down things that you see as being critical. We're going to do this for 9 minutes, and then in the last minute, I'm going to have you leave. I'll have an exercise set up, and you'll have what's called an exit ticket. We'll have you do the exit ticket on the way out. Okay? So go ahead. We'll bring you back in 9 minutes. If you are online, feel free to add any of your responses to the feedback form, and we will collect that in that feedback form as well. Just maybe put it like, hey, this is a number 1. We think it's important to do this, or a 2 and then a colon. That could help us sort it, but we'll be able to sort it out regardless of what you add. All right. I see some great feedback. We're not done. You have 2 minutes. You have 1 minute. 1 minute. All right. While folks are wrapping up, to this gentleman's point earlier, how does all of this come together, right? How is all this coming together? So the back end of all of this feedback is a complex set of data that both the architectural team in collaboration with district's facilities and operations team is using to create a decision-making framework. And so what's in that framework? The first thing is what's called a facility condition index, right? This is a company was hired to walk through all the buildings and say, hey, what needs to be repaired? What needs to just get replaced? What are the needs that exist in all of the buildings? In addition to that, we are creating what is called an adaptability assessment. So all of the feedback that we receive from the community related to the types of learning environments and the types of programming that the district wants to provide, to add on to the facility condition index, we're saying, okay, here's your existing conditions, so mechanical systems, restrooms, ceilings, roofs, all flooring. Adaptability, will the building support the changes that need to occur to create the new spaces, the modified environments, the flexibility, the adaptability, the new laboratories, the new resources that the community wants to have? So for each of the buildings, we're creating an adaptability assessment. And we're doing that by looking at the floor plans and the building layouts, the materials and the use of how the building was structured, and then overall safety, right? Is the building, given best practices in facility safety, is it a safe building, right? And because that is so important for the community. And then, in addition to that, we're looking at the utilization of spaces. So what buildings are full and bursting at the seams, what buildings are empty, and which ones are in the Goldilocks zone of being about right. And then, looking at the demographic and population data, how might those things change over the next 20 years? All of these parameters and we're currently building it because there's so much data, all of these parameters are being added to a decision-making tool that the district will have to help weigh and understand the complexity of challenges that exist in balancing all of these decisions. One thing that's missing from that is very important here, which is the historical significance of your facilities. You have, in this district, 11 buildings that are turning 100 years old this decade. Right? That is, I'm going to just use the word amazing in the true spirit of the word amazing. That is amazing that you have that many buildings that are at that age. It means they've been generally fairly well taken care of to last that long. But these are very old buildings, right? And they have constraints and conditions that may not be useful for the future of learning. However, some of them may be useful, right? And so this condition of facility assessment and the adaptability assessment and the utilization will help us think about how to make changes in a master plan, but we also need to know kind of the legacy and historical significance of some of these things, because that weighs into the decision, right? We would never go into a community and be like, oh, all your buildings are old, knock them all down, right? That would be potentially misinformed if the community had attachments and connections to those things. So the very last thing I want to leave everyone with is if everybody could put on a sticky note from 1 to 20, right? You don't have to write anything down yet, but you're going to put a number on your sticky note. And this is your exit ticket. We want you to leave and give this to either Zach or myself. Imagine a future where Dearborn is the source of the most innovative and well-prepared workforce in Michigan, right? Imagine that future for a moment. All of the teaching and learning things that we've discussed today have been solved. The people graduating Dearborn are the most prepared in the entire state to succeed in what the world has to offer them, right? And not only workforce, I want to add family force. I want to add just existing in this world and thriving, right? Work is not the only thing that we're aiming for. There are other parameters. But imagine everyone is leaving Dearborn extremely well prepared for their next step. How might we get there? This is a complex question. So this is just a snapshot. It's another set of data that we want to collect. On one end of the spectrum is lean into a tradition of innovation and transformation, leaning on the tradition of Ford, right? This parameter, and I'm not saying it's exactly this, but an example of a 20, right? A number 20 would be, we're going to replace every 100-year-old building and do brand new and innovative things, right? That would be a 20. A 1 or 0 would be, we're going to build on our foundation of success as a community, and we're going to preserve as many of the aging facilities as possible. We want to protect that heritage, right? Because that's important to us. Right? This is a complex one, right? And there's no right answer here, so we're looking for your instinct. Do you think we are a 20, a 0 or a 1, or somewhere in between that? Are we a 17, or are we a 10, right in the middle? We want to know your impression about how we start to think about treating some of these historic buildings, right? And I'll give you an example. It might mean that if you were to do a 1, that all of these would, that they would stay standing. But maybe you did something in the middle. Maybe we would find ways to preserve existing facilities, but they wouldn't be schools. Maybe it'd be a community center, or maybe it'd get transformed into an art facility or something like that, or a workshop environment, an entrepreneurship hub, a co-working space. Right? There are lots of different ways to reuse buildings. So we're looking for your final exit ticket. Are we a 20? Are you thinking we're a 1? Or are we somewhere in between? Write one answer, one number on a sticky note, and that is our exit ticket tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming out. For those of you in the room and online, this is recorded, so you can revisit this. It'll be on YouTube, on Dearborn's YouTube channel. In addition, the presentation and other resources related to the questions and eventually the responses to the questions will be on Dearborn's district website under the facilities area of that website. Is that clear enough? Look for the first Bell website. Perfect. So that's where that will be. Questions for the good of the community. Yes, you have a question.
When do we carry on this conversation? Because you really didn't get a chance to hear the rest of us.
We did not get a chance to hear everyone's voice. So one thing is if you have other questions or comments, please put them on the question category or stay with us for a few minutes and ask them, and we will be sure to collect that from you. I just want to be respectful of folks so that they can leave if they need to. So I will be here to answer questions for at least another 30 minutes if you'd like me to be. And yes, other question.
When you said we, do you mean that you want us to assess where we think our community as a whole is or where we are personally on that spectrum?
I would like you to respond with your feedback. You are here today in the room. You have a voice, and I want to know what your voice is.
Just, you're probably going to do this, but I just want to feel better that you are going to do this. I mean, the teachers are the most important part too. It's for the parents and the students, but the teachers use these spaces all the time, and they know the nuances and intricacies that the community may not. So I would hope you guys are going to probably survey the teachers, and I'm sure all our teachers would respond.
So every survey that we've sent out, we have given to staff to be able to respond to for kind of the broader. Also, when we did a series of in-person engagements where we looked at the actual conditions of teaching and learning experiences for the future, got their feedback. That's what informed kind of these images and these insights around the room in terms of their preferences. The teachers will continue to be engaged in the process, absolutely. where teacher voice is even more important as you get into making the decisions on how the spaces are actually designed, less which building might get shifted or how community resources might get distributed a little bit differently, although of course feedback on that as well. But teachers really have a critical role in helping inform the physical design of any of these changes, because that is where it will impact their day-to-day life. And so as just a advocate for that, that's perhaps the most important place for teachers to engage. Yep. Thank you all for your time tonight. I'm very appreciative of it. I will be here answering questions with Zach. Please give us your exit ticket on the way out, and know that we are here to answer questions. And you will not see the end. This is not the end of us, hopefully. So we'll be working with you through into April to get a master plan that the district can respond to, so that your board can respond to, and hopefully it's reflective of many of the things that we heard today. So I'm very appreciative of all your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you for your time, everyone. Have a good night.